Hey, what's going on, guys? So today we're talking about a Salamangreat deck profile. This is my Salamangreat deck profile. I've made actually a good amount of tweaks to this deck, per se, over time. When I originally got this deck, it was really only going to be because I was trying to, play around the market a little bit, because at the time I got this deck, Circle was at 1, Stallion was at 0, and Gazelle was at 1. And so I anticipated, I would buy this deck at a real low budget. All the cards would come back, they'd shoot up in price, and I would sell it off. Obviously, Gazelle's still at 1, and so is my Stallion, but in doing that, I've actually found a deck I really enjoy. So this is my updated Salamangreat deck profile. If you guys want to see any deck profiles, let me know in those comments down below. I'm working on the Bug deck. I also have a Tri-Brigade core, so I'm also working on just something with Tri-Brigade. So if you guys have any decks that you'd like me to do, obviously within a certain budget range, not doing Cash Tira next week, but like a relatively budget deck, I would be more than welcome that type of suggestion. But without further ado, one copy of Salamangreat Gazelle. I think this card could come back to 3. I think if this card came back to 3, Salamangreat would be tier 2, high tier 2, but not really any higher. I mean, in playtesting, I playtested it against a bunch of different like Sword Soul, Trap Tricks, different things like that. Not like Cash Tira though, because I feel like this deck just gets dumpstered by Cash Tira, so really there's no point. Obviously if you have like Book of Eclipse, Dark Hole, or Regeki, Lightning Storm, like we can do things to play through that deck, but that deck is just insane. And that's what I'm saying. Like, if Gazelle came back to 3, I don't think Salamangreat would be tier 1. So I don't really know why Gazelle's still at 1, but as long as it's at 1, there it is. It's just, there's so many really cool plays you can do when you open Gazelle, and it's just a lot more likely to open it when you have it in more than just 1. 3 copies of Salamangreat Spinny. Right, my complaining aside, 3 copies of Salamangreat Spinny. I just like one card wolves. That's what we're looking for. 1 card wolves. And Salamangreat Spinny is that. Obviously, someone bailing, someone will back out the Spinny and go crazy there. There's really not much else to say. Obviously, the synergy with Gazelle is really cool. You can dodge the Banishing, the Phantom Knights type thing. You know the plays, right? I don't have to dive too deep into why that's such a good card. A lot of people do run that card at 3. I do see some lists go to 2, but this is a little bit of a different list here. We're running 3 copies of Salamangreat Foxy. Foxy obviously has the potential to be the best starter card in the entire deck, outside of course, Salamangreat Gazelle. But even, you'd rather open Gazelle and Foxy as well. It feels really good when you get your 1 Gazelle off of Foxy. I don't see a lot of people playing 3 Foxies. I think it's a fantastic card. What I also like about Foxy is that secondary effect. We can get rid of our opponent's Runic Fountains, the Cash Tira field spell, the Floowandereeze map, even the Floowandereeze continuous spell. I don't know, I keep saying Floowandereeze. Floowandereeze is a terrible deck. But like Trap Tricks can run like Summon Limit, which can be a bit of a pesky problem. Anti-Spell Fragrance can be a bit of an issue. Obviously, like Goes in Match Rivalry isn't too much of a problem. Like, this deck could run those cards. That's how you beat Cash Tira. But Foxy just says no to all floodgates, which is really cool. But that excavating effect is really awesome. 2 copies of Jack Jaguar once again. 1 card wolves. That's what we're looking for. Obviously, it's a little unfortunate. We got to use Balinks to summon another Balinks to get out wolf. But it's essentially a free combo to get into wolf, which is what I really like. The piercing doesn't really ever come up, but don't forget that it's there, right? Like, that can be, especially in time, that can be the difference between a win and a loss. Most Salamangreat cards have 2 effects, so just always remember that there's 2 there. Falco is really cool as well. I love both effects with Falco. A lot of different hand manipulation, graveyard manipulation things you can do with Salamangreat Falco. Not really much else to say. A lot of people run that card at 1. Foul is interesting. I playtested a lot against Trap Tricks, and I never really found a spot where I needed to play multiple fouls, but in theory, that would be a really good matchup. And like, especially Labyrinth. Labyrinth is probably the 2nd best deck right now, if not the best. And foul is gonna force those cards out really quick. So you could see running multiple fouls, but you really only need 1 foul to do all of that, and it is searchable off of Circle. You can add it back off of Wolf if you send it off of Gazelle. There's a lot of different things you can do with all of that. And then 3 copies of the complimentary Salamangreat card, Flame Buffalo, level 3 Fire Cybers monster. Might as well be Salamangreat Buffalo. This is just fantastic starter card. You want to see this as early and as often as possible. So many great plays you can do. It is another reason why I'm running a heftier Salamangreat lineup. You know, to be honest, I'm not running Parallel Exceed. If you were, I could see potentially maybe cutting like a Jack, you know, a Foxy and a Spinny for that Parallel Exceed, because you can send Parallel Exceed off Flame Buffalo. I just find a lot of times Parallel Exceed is bricky. You can't use it under Rivalry or you can use it under Rivalry, but not Goes in Match. I don't love Parallel Exceed, honestly, in this deck. I run it in a lot of other decks, but not in this one. I know that might be like, what are you talking about? But in testing, I really never needed the Parallel Exceed. Flame Buffalo, Jack Jaguar, just more Salamangreat cards is what gets me there. And of course, 3 copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Springs. I saw a deck list. It got like first place at a locals. Wasn't running this card. And you know, kudos to that person. Obviously, they were able to do well, but I also think maybe it was just the matchups. And obviously, this format, you know, Ash is insane. The deck I was watching was from like 6 months ago, so obviously a different format. Like, you know, the opponent drops Branded Fusion, you just play Ash and they lose. But Sword Soul kind of gets hurt by this as well. You Ash the Big Welcome Labyrinth, you know, that's crazy as well. But Ash can be recycled off of Wolf. You know, that is the biggest thing. Like, my favorite interaction in the deck is summon a monster in front of Wolf or behind Wolf, one of the arrows, add Ash back to your hand. Like, that's just so free. Like, I sign in mining pitching Ash all the time. Like, it's just so free to get your Ashes in circulation in the combo. So that's why you gotta run Ash Blossom and Joy Springs. Because here's the thing, okay? Even if Ash is terrible, like it kind of was bad last format, you're not gonna, I know it was a tier 0 format, but you're not gonna always be playing the best meta deck, right? So just because Ash isn't good against the top 5 best decks in the room doesn't mean it's not good against number 6. Doesn't mean you're going to be facing those decks. You all of a sudden think you're playing, you know, you're going to be doing great, and you're not main decking Ash, you're main decking Droll and Lockbird, and then someone summons a B-Trooper Scout Bucky. And you're like, oh, I mean, Droll's actually okay against bugs, because Resonant Insects and Italians, he like to search, but I really wish I had Ash here to shut my opponent down, right? Or just even like the, you know, Branded matchup. Like, Branded wasn't that great before Tier Elements got hit. You know, but that deck was still floating around randomly. You know, the Bestials kind of took it out of the meta. But Ash is good against a lot of rogue decks. A lot like Crystal Beast, for example, is another good example of a deck that really needs certain cards to search, certain cards to summon from deck. And Ash just says no. So Ash is just one of the best cards in the entire game. You should always be running it. And that is it for the monsters. 3 copies of Salamangreat Circle. Don't forget that this can protect our Salamangreat Link monsters with its secondary effect. I know it never really comes up, but just don't forget that it exists. It's a great searcher. It's a great card to set back with Falco. It's a great card to add back with Wolf. You can use it during your opponent's end phase and then use it during your draw phase. Like, there's just so much cool things here. That's another pro tip as well. We were just talking about Droll and Lockbird. Use Salamangreat Circle during the draw phase to play around Droll and Lockbird. And, like, there's just so many really cool things that this card has access to. I'm so glad this card came back to 3. And it made the deck so much more viable, so much more competitive. I am also running 2 copies of Will of the Salamangreat. I cut this down to 2. I think the last list I had it at 3. It just gets a little bit bricky. It doesn't give you a lot of value if you don't open it with any Salamangreat monsters. But it's, you know, there's, like I said, hefty Salamangreat lineup. So, you know, Will of the Salamangreat can get you there. But being able to just summon out a free, you know, Salamangreat monster is huge. And potentially 2 monsters if it sends itself to the grave is really big as well. 1 copy is Sanctuary because it's Sanctuary. It has that life gain effect, which never comes up, but it can. I am main decking Harpy's Feather Duster. This could be a Lightning Storm. This could be a Raigeki. Board wipes are actually pretty crazy in this deck. This deck is kind of a rogue deck. By kind of, I mean this deck is a rogue deck. So, you know, having a board wipe like Raigeki, or in this case, Harpy's Feather Duster, is just insane, especially with so many trap decks actually being really meta. Harpies is just so good, and a lot of people don't anticipate it. So I am main decking the Harpies. I switched this up as well. I'm running Pot of Avarice and Upstart. There's a reason Upstart Goblin's at 1 and Pot of Avarice is at 3, because it's just a better card. But Pot of Avarice is a really, really good card. If you're not running Pot of Avarice in Salamangreat deck, I strongly insist that you do. Honestly, you could cut the Harpies and run a second Pot of Avarice. I was running 2. It feels fine. I just prefer 1 because you want to see it some of the times, but not all the time. 1 Called by Monster Reborn. Foolish, obviously. Called by is called by. Pesky hand traps. I was just talking about how great Ash is. Ash is pretty good against this deck. Foolish is insane. Monster Reborn is cool. I gotta get a higher rarity Monster Reborn. And then the final spell, 3 copies of Signet Mining. Goes without saying. I have thought about cutting this card because this card gets hard crushed by Ash. But the reason I don't is if it resolves, it's really good. So it's kind of worth it. But if I was running 3 Gazelle, like if I had access to 3 Gazelle, I probably would cut this card. I've talked about that before, because that's how often I've done these deck profiles, and that's how long it's been since Gazelle has been banned. But for the trap cards, 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. I just think Ash and Infinite Impermanence are just the best 2 hand traps in the game. Goes without saying. And I'm actually doing, this is a bit of a unique take, but I'm running 2 Roar and 2 Rage, right? I want to open these as often as possible, because here's my thing. And I've said this a lot before on my deck profiles, but when it comes to playing a rogue deck, and like I said, this is what Salamangreat is, it's a rogue deck. You can either make your deck go a lot faster, so it can compete with the meta, or you can make the meta go a lot slower. So I want to open one of these 4 every single duel. Especially going first. Obviously, we're going to side out a copy or 2 if we know we're going second. But that's another reason why I'm not running Parallel Exceed. Parallel Exceed is an extender. This card is a card. These cards are cards that slow the game way down, especially because we can recycle them with Roar's own effect as well as Wolf's effect. And they're almost always going to be live. But that was why when I was talking about earlier with Spinny and Jaguar being 1 card Wolves and that being so crucial, these cards are why, because these cards are super big under Wolf, especially if we're able to get Wolf using Wolf as material. So Rage is live and can get 2 pops, because that's pretty crazy. Like, yeah, it's a rogue deck, but 3 forms of disruption can still do some things, especially if we have access to our Ash Blossom or an Infinite Impermanence type situation. For the extra deck, 2 copies of Balinks. I don't see the need to run 3, but you can if you want to. 3 copies of Wolf. I honestly wish I could run 4. That's just so weird. Like it is more of a grindy deck, more of like a slower control-based deck. So you do start to run out of resources. And I know Jaguar, can put cards back, and that is why we're running the Pot of Avarice as well. But I still find times where I'm like, man, I wish I had a 4th Wolf. 1 copy of Salamangreat Heatleo. Heatleo is just really cool. It's a Salamangreat card, so Jaguar can summon itself to it. Spinny can make it bigger. Roar is active while it's up. There's a lot of really cool things Heatleo can do, and spin back row's, one of the other better things that it does. 1 copy of Splash Mage, 1 Update Jammer, 1 Appaloosa, 1 Access Code Talker. On the last video, I got a comment saying like, oh, why are you not running Transcode Talker? You have to run Transcode Talker. It's a Cybers deck. You really don't. Like, there are decks like Code Talker, for example, that can run Transcode. And if you have space in your Salamangreat deck, by all means, run Transcode. I've never really seen an issue with an access code that can attack twice with 4,300 attack. Transcode's fine, but I've never really needed it. And I would rather run like Appaloosa or one of the, the 5 cards I haven't showed you yet over Transcode. Like, I legitimately think every card that I've placed down and every card in my hand that I've yet to show is a better card in my extra deck than Transcode. If there was a 16 card extra deck, Transcode would be number 16. But the last card is Decode Talker Heat Soul. Obviously, absolutely fantastic card, phenomenal. Especially if you don't open the Rages and the Roars, we can still do some things. Because you don't open Rage and Roar, there's really no reason to end on a Salamangreat monster if you don't have to, right? But that's it for the Link monsters. 10 of those buggers. For the Xyz, obviously we're running the 1 Mirage Stalio, could come back to 3. I would still run it at 1. Don't forget as a secondary effect, obviously, where you bounce an opponent's card if it's used as a Link material, but it does have to be a Salamangreat Link monster. It's actually a really solid card. It does a lot of really awesome things. I don't need to, you know, this is like McDonald's, bro. Like, it sells itself. Like, I don't need to sell it to you. And then I am running 1 number 41 and 1 Abyss Dweller. Baguska is just such a great card. Being able to end on Roar Rage Baguska with a Wolf that used Wolf, I mean, honestly, or like Dweller, it's just almost sometimes just GG. You know what I mean? You could argue that does kind of bring in the parallel Xyz argument back into this situation, but me personally, I make Baguska all the time without using that card, right? And so the final card I am running is Divine Arsenal Zeus. Now, I think this could be the card you would cut for Transcode, but I think that a lot of people don't realize that Zeus could potentially see play in a Salamangreat deck, because all you have to do is attack with your Baguska, attack with your Mirage Stalio, summon the Zeus, and all of a sudden, boom, it's a board wipe. And the thing is, too, I said this with the Trap Tricks deck, if the Cashier player snipes our Zeus, we don't care, right? It's more of a, but it probably snipe the Access Code Talker, because honestly, that's a better card in this deck anyway. But that's all she wrote, folks. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. This is my Salamangreat deck profile. Make sure you guys click that like button, show your support for the channel, subscribe if you have more content, but most importantly of all, have a good day.